October 26th. And I'm going to use my prerogative as chair to change the agenda just a little bit. We've had a request from Beth Kavanaugh to present testimony, and she cannot. Normally we do it at the end. She can't. She won't be able to do that, so she's asked if she could go first. So why don't we start with that? Go ahead, Beth.
Thank you so much for accommodating my schedule. My name is Beth Kavanaugh, that's Cavanaughh, and she, her. I'm here to express the importance of addressing PPS's foundation fundraising policies on this committee, specifically the local school foundations. I know it's been listed as part of future work on policy committee agendas for quite some time now. With equity at the forefront, it's an important time to address policies that were set up 20 years ago that are outdated and perpetuating inequities in our school system today. There's a lot of support right now among parents, teachers, and community leaders to reform the foundation fundraising policies. The change needs to come from the board. Individual parents and groups within schools can create support, but fundraising will not become more equitable without changes to board policy. The current foundation system is not transparent. Many parents, teachers, and even some principals don't understand the foundation system and don't know that some schools are able to buy extra teachers year after year. I've been working with a group of PPS community members to create an informational campaign about system-wide foundation fundraising in PPS, how it works, how the funds are distributed, and who has benefited the most. A lot of people don't know what's going on outside of their own school, so it's really difficult to see the systemic impact. We want to help create a groundswell of support for reforming the fundraising policy with racial equity at the core. We're glad to see it's going to be an active part of the work plan going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we had one other person signed up for testimony. Mike Rosen. Is Mike on?
I see him there.
Okay. Mike, are you prepared to speak now, or would you rather wait until the end?
I wanted to wait until the end, Rita. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak?
No, it's just us two.
Okay. All right. Kara, can you remind me to make sure we have time at the end to have Mike speak?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's jump right in. We have, so this is the first expanded policy committee meeting. So we're going to try doing this for 3 hours and hopefully try to make some real progress on a number of things. The first topic is on the work plan. So you should have received over the weekend a revised version of the work plan spreadsheet, and it's very similar to what you saw a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. It's been slightly revised, and there's been some additional information, including dates around when these various policies would come before the committee and target dates for first reading. And then probably just today, you may or may not have had a chance to look at it. We have a sort of calendar version, sort of a Gantt chart version of the chart. This is our attempt to make it a little easier to kind of wrap our individual and collective heads around how this is going to play out over the next few months. Some of the things have not been, some of the policies that are listed don't have dates attached. for a couple of reasons. Either we don't have the policy proposal in hand and we don't really know when we're going to have it, or our discussions, our committee discussions are dependent on some other work happening in another part of the organization. So we'll have to hold off, find out when that's ready for us to consider. So we've got a fair number of policies that are on this list, and between these two documents, you can get a sense of how onerous the work is going to be. If you look at the chart, this chart, it gives a sort of best guess about how onerous the work is going to be on staff side and board side. And then if you take a look at the sort of Gantt chart version,
Hey, Rita, I'm sorry. Where is that document?
it's in the board book.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Is that the? So this, when did that get added? Is that?
Just today. Okay, I know it's late. We were trying to do something to make it easier. Everything that's on this chart is also on the other chart. So for some people, this might be easier to visualize how the work will play out. For others, it may not. You have both of them.
Director Moore.
Just to clarify, there were two documents. There was a draft work plan 1 and just a draft work plan. Which one of those documents?
They're both the same. They were duplicates.
Okay, so they're just the same document. Okay.
It's just same. Yeah.
And for the timeline, what is the the ones in green and ones in white? What's the difference?
Okay, so Kara, do you want to explain, or do you want me to?
Either way, they're the same. And they got uploaded. My internet was weird, and they duplicated, uploaded. But they should be this. They had all the same information.
Okay. So the question was on the second document, the Gantt chart one. So what do the colors mean? Is that the question?
Sorry.
Okay. So so white means, white means nothing at this point. It's like, so the calendaring for individual policies, if it's already been introduced to the committee, you start with the light green in progress. Okay, if it hasn't yet been introduced, then the calendaring starts with a gray box. That's the first time it's on the agenda. And then it's followed by green. And the blue box indicates the proposed date for first reading.
Okay, so I guess I think I phrased my question wrong. So each column has dates on it, and then at the top there's a green and a white. What are the difference? What does that mean?
It's board meeting versus committee meetings.
So COM is committee, reg is regular board meeting. Okay. Okay, this may look fairly complicated. It's less complicated than a couple of things we tried. And I have no design sense whatsoever. So forgive me if this is not useful. If it is useful, thank Kara. If it's not useful, blame me, or just ignore it. Up to you. So So is there anything on here? This gives you a sense of what staff, the kind of prioritization based on staff capacity, staff assessment of the urgency, plus board commentary at the last meeting. So that kind of lays out the order in which we're hoping to tackle these different policies.
I do have an amendment to it. I wasn't able to reach out to Jenny Withacombe, who is going to be leading the changes for the sex ed curriculum policy. She is asking that we push it out further in the spring. She thinks she could have it ready in January. So we have it slated now for a first reading at the December 15th board meeting. She's
Okay.
asking for additional time. So that's a change we can make for the next committee meeting, but I just wanted to alert you to that.
Okay. Okay, and just to remind people, so this is the Title IX policy, right?
No, sorry. It's,
Comprehensive sexuality, that one?
yeah, yes.
Okay, okay. All right. So I don't think we have a mandated deadline on that policy. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. So I think, and that is, as I understand it, we're anticipating that those changes are going to be relatively technical, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, so that seems like an easy fix. We can come up with a new date and revise. My guess is this thing is going to be a work in progress. So we're going to have to keep updating it as we make progress or not, depending.
It's kind of, it's looking a bit at the layers of staff. So you're looking, we have to take it, when we try to take it to the, the owners of the policy to try to get an assessment of, and then they try to realize their capacity. It may move around a bit.
Yeah. So this is a starting point. So without getting into a lot of detail about individual policies, let's start off first with, are there any questions about kind of the way we've laid out the sequencing of the work? Are there any questions there?
It looks to me like it's a pretty light workload. I'm wondering if we can add 5 or 6 more policies to. No, I appreciate the work that's been done to lay this out, and I think we should all understand that the first casualty of war is the plan, but it's good to have a plan to start from and something to aspire to. So thanks for everybody who tried to do this in several different ways to make it easier to understand.
Yeah, I find it really helpful to have this policy, to have this draft plan to help us kind of have some targets. I know, from our public comment and emails we've been getting, there's a lot of frustration about, delays in the climate policy. And I know that there's a lot of anxiety from board members around certain policies. So I think we can't do everything all at once. So having a clear plan of how we're going to tier this and get things through is very, very helpful. So thank you for those who worked on this.
Yeah, so likewise, I'm a very visual person, so both documents are helpful. You want me to save my comments about the contents? Or should I just say them now?
Why don't you try now?
Okay.
We'll see what they are.
Again, I'm a very visual person, so I appreciate the layout, because it looks like a frame up. So a couple, just a question, and I don't need an answer now, but just the thinking about the OSBA, because that's just a like line item. And that could be a huge thing or that could be a little thing. And so just having a better sense of like, what is that? Like, are there some things that we for sure, you know, if it's light, is that just like rescissions or what is it? So at your point in time, I'd like a little bit more detail on that. And then there were two issues that I raised last time that aren't on this. Well, we just had a very short, at the very end of the last meeting, just a brief discussion about it. But I would like to have a discussion about the policy about school board elections, given the passage of the state law. And today in the New York Times, there was a front page piece about sort of race and a Georgia county school board election, and sort of just how the policy of how school board races are, you know, what the policy is really impacts who gets to participate. And I'm happy to send the article around. I thought it was a really interesting piece. And like I say, we have the state law. I think we should at least dive into it and look at it, because every election cycle, people say, I can't run for the school board because it's a massive thing to both campaign and then serve. So I'd like to add that. And then the second piece, and this is not a wholesale revision, but I'd like to bring some proposed amendments to the property naming policy. I think since we adopted it 3 years ago, there's been some issues raised that I think, you know, it was a totally different time 3 years ago that I'd like to bring for consideration. I don't think they would be either heavy workload for the staff or for the board, but people are free to make a determination of how heavy or light they are when I bring them. But I think they're just fine tuning. And then my last point would be, by our policy, we allow that essentially just about anybody can bring forward a policy. And so what is going to be our policy? Maybe we get this in the committee charter, but how are we going to accommodate the other places where policy IDs are going to come from? Because basically what our policy says is anybody can, you know, a community member, a staff member can advance a policy for the board's consideration. And what's the process that is transparent and doesn't seem arbitrary, that we either deliberate and change a policy or say, like, that's just not going to get in the queue. So those are my topics, but overall, I think this is a great foundational piece of work.
So in regards to one of the policies that Director Brim-Edwards brought up in terms of the naming, it seems like we should, we have sort of had an understanding that we're having this, particularly in school renaming. We're doing a pilot project, actually two, from my understanding. Wilson and Madison are in route, and that we were going to revisit both the process and perhaps the policy once those processes are completed. So in terms of timing, it would seem like after we've gone through that, finish those processes would be a good time. I know as a board member, I'm expecting to do a debrief, you know, both a decision one way or another and a debrief based on what the recommendations are. So I think I'd like to see, in terms of timing, that would be at least after the new year before we could start to look at that. Is that fair? Danny, I see you shaking your head on that.
So just a point of clarification. So we paused on the administrative directive So what we're doing right now is that we're engaged in an engagement process to review the administrative directive underneath the policy, and sort of have paused name changes for now so that we could sort of speak more closely to sort of the process. And so we are using the two case studies of Madison and Wilson. And we had our first meeting led by Shanice Clark last week of the group. It's a really strong student-centered design process. And so I'm going to link the details. It has the phases of it. And the timeline is right, just maybe a month or two behind what you just said, Director Bailey. So I'm going to link that sort of webpage to you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to connect with me or Shanice.
And I should clarify, and I'm going to bring to the committee what I'm suggesting, because it actually, I don't think goes to the naming process. It's just the policy in which that would be the most logical place for, or I could come up with a different policy number, and it's not a major change. So
can I just underscore, for policies, we need to make a distinction between the policy itself and the administrative directive.
Right.
So just, and I guess the other thing I would say, if we're going to reopen the property naming policy, then I would probably want to offer some revisions as well. So let's, let me make a suggestion. With these policies that, or these additional policies that are not already listed, we have, I think we've got a pretty heavy schedule through February at this point. And I think it makes sense to, I mean, first of all, these are the policies that we know about. We have come to learn over the last 3 years that things pop up unexpectedly on a fairly regular basis. And when they pop up, there tends to be a fair amount of urgency attached to them. So we want to make sure that we build in a little bit of flexibility in order to respond to emergency situations that might develop. But let's think about these additional policies in terms of kind of later in the winter, where I think hopefully we will be able to make some real progress on a lot of the work that's already been scheduled out. And then we should have some additional capacity after that. So let's take those under advisement and then come back with a revised calendar. I'd like to get some sense from the staff about how much work we can anticipate. If you have Julia, if you have already in your head some of the revisions that you would like to offer, if you can send that out so that we can so staff can assess how much work it would take on their end. And then if anybody else has suggestions about revisions for these other policies, do likewise. Does that sound okay? Does that sound reasonable?
Yep. I can for sure send something off to all the relevant parties here. I have a question based on Danny's comment about the timeline. And because one of the things about the naming policy that wasn't clear is that, so we had like, if you submit a petition, that kind of gets the process going where you demonstrate enough votes. And we have, so if I look at the calendar and then the calendar that Danny sort of sketched out about the AD, we have 2 schools that we've received petitions to have name changes, Madison and Kellogg, which are actively being built. And I'm curious, are we disconnecting from the build timeline, and or is it how is it aligned with the current timeline? Because I haven't heard any discussion about catching up the petition on Kellogg renaming with the currently something being brought to the board.
So we've approached them differently. So Madison and Wilson, Madison's timeline, we are working really hard to align with the construction timeline. However, there are there can be some tension around like wanting to do a really robust process. Well, with the sort of like, we're trying not to make the construction timeline be the driver, and sort of like build that muscle around like how do we do really intentional good process without compromising the engagement that we think will make it happen. For the Kellogg renaming, we've paused that. I think because Kellogg doesn't have an attendance area yet, because there's so much to be discovered in the guiding coalition process and in the enrollment and program balancing process. It felt premature to establish a committee to do renaming and to use that as a pilot. Felt like we don't know what the community is yet there. And so we wanted to really honor that intersecting process. The other thing I would say is that, Shanice's team is staffing all of these. And in order to do an effective community engagement process for these, adding another school at this time is untenable. So Kellogg is not, is going to have to sort of wait to go through the process that comes out of some of the administrative directive changes.
Yeah, I think the Kellogg process would be a great sort of school community building process once we actually have kids in the building. To me, that's the ideal. And clearly Shanice is getting too much sleep. So if not Kellogg, maybe a couple of other schools we could, sorry.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep us on schedule because we've got a lot to cover today. So this is, are we okay with this calendar as it currently exists? With the understanding that it's going to be continually updated?
Could I ask a quick question around the enrollment
Sure.
policy?
Yeah.
Is there a reason why we don't really have a date yet?
Is there a reason? Well, probably yes and no. That's going to be, I think, the next revision that needs to happen with it. Like we've got to hit on some dates for that.
I can say staff who populated the dates did not know and feel like they had enough information to guess. So this was our best marker, but there were some blanks. As a point of process, Rita, going forward, shall we bring an updated version of this to each meeting? You can decide, since it will be refined and be incorporating new information. I want to make sure it's being used and updated in the way you want it to be.
So, I guess this is let me throw out this suggestion, and then people can weigh in. So I think it's reasonable to have the most updated timeline attached to every committee meeting agenda. I would prefer, just for the sake of time, I would prefer that it not be a standing agenda item for every meeting. But if there are big changes that require some discussion, then we can throw it on the agenda. But otherwise, it would be a kind of informational thing that would be available for every committee meeting. It'll be in the board book, and you can just take a look at it. Does that make sense?
From a staff
Yeah,
perspective,
and
yes.
Okay.
one comment about the enrollment. I mean, we are in the Guiding Coalition, we're expecting to have phase 1 decided upon and implemented less than a year from now. So
Yep.
in my opinion, I feel like that's a pretty high priority when it'll be affecting most of Southeast.
Yep. We agree. Yes. We just need to figure out the details of, like, what do we imagine that's going to look like? What kind of workload? What's the capacity? How do we build it into everybody's schedule? I have a new appreciation for three-dimensional chess after trying to come up with this stuff. So anyway, and let me just make one last comment about this before we move on. Embedded in this timeline, these timelines, these lines for each of the policies is a community engagement process. And we were trying to figure out a way to visualize that, and it got really complicated, so we're still working on that. But I just want to reassure everybody that the community engagement component has been built into this, just so you know. Okay? Okay. Cool. Thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda is the preservation, maintenance, and disposition of district real property policy. So you should have the redlined version, red and blue lined version of this policy with some staff suggestions and an additional suggestions that I made for revision. Have there been any changes since the last meeting?
So the last meeting, this was prepared, but we didn't get to it.
Right.
And I am trying to, if there were, I can't remember, Rita, if one of your changes came before or after that meeting, but what was endeavored to take place in these edits was to capture the feedback we got from 2 meetings ago and feed that back in, and forever some, anytime we can see opportunities for cleanup edits, but the substantive edits here, unless, and I'm sorry, I'm just not recalling the order.
So so the memory banks are kicking in now. So I think I did offer my edits, my revisions prior to the last meeting. So I think you may have had an opportunity to see these changes, but we did not get a chance to talk about them at the last meeting.
That's correct.
Okay, so let me, and I'm going to interrupt myself again because I forgot to do something that I intended to do. So I just want to acknowledge that we have a new board member who has been added to this committee, Ailey Lowry. So we now have 4 board members on this committee. And the rationale for doing that is that we got a few things going on. We're trying to be as efficient and effective as we can to get through all of these policies and perform due diligence and, get these policies as right as we can get them. So we're applying the concept of, many hands make light work, and hoping that will actually play out that way. So I just want to let you all know that it's now 4 of us, plus the student representative. Okay, so back to the policy. if you've had a chance to look at these changes, there are a fair number of them. And before we go kind of one by one, does anybody have any general comments about the revisions?
So I don't know, you want us to just jump in? It's like,
well, if anybody has any kind of overall comment about the kind of the changes in totality, if not, we can go paragraph by paragraph.
yeah, so I have, like, at least to start with, like, two sort of big, I guess, overarching. So the new language that was added in the first sentence, that the property has been bequeathed to us by previous generations, I would suggest that language be changed because actually, just given we often have land acknowledgements before our meetings, that really the land wasn't given us to us by the people who lived here at the time. So it's a sweeping statement that seems to be in conflict with the land acknowledgements that we make. I think I know what was trying to be expressed, but I wouldn't be comfortable with that framing, and I'd be interested to know, or I'd be interested in input from the community about a better way to frame that, about, whose land and property is it? So that's one thing. And then the concept, and not getting into the individual language, but the concept that we wouldn't sell a property in consideration of replacing it with an equivalent or better property is problematic, because it essentially says our current footprint is going to be the footprint for all time, even if we had something better. And I think we are contemplating actually some things that will change our footprint, and we should always be open to, like, better, not to hold on to something just because we've always had it, but if we could get better, that I think we should, I don't think we should turn down better. So I just think conceptually I have a issue with changing that, because we're a dynamic, the population changes, we're a dynamic district, and again, I know what the concept was, but I think by saying that we would never take a better property for something that we've held on to is just, I think not what we want to commit to, because it will certainly bind our hands with some property deals we're looking at.
Okay, we can talk about this. I just want to point out it does not say never. The new language does not say never. It does not preclude.
Well, I don't know why we dropped, though, a better property.
So why don't we, I appreciate the points you're bringing up. Why don't we go through paragraph by paragraph?
Yeah,
and get to the meat of it.
Sorry, Scott, I thought you were done talking. My internet.
Yeah, no, good.
I was going to say, I agree with Director Brim-Edwards. I think the intention around that language about generations is trying to honor the past work of PPS, which I think is really important. But I do also think, we have to be aware of the generations that came before PPS. And so I think a way how to honor that, sort of, in my churchy world, we'd say stewardship of the past resources. So I think editing that, I'm trying to read it and come up with changed language. Does anyone have any suggestions there? Or Director Moore, how do you feel about that initial sentence?
I mean, like most things can easily stand editing. So, let me make a suggestion. I think what we're talking about is going to require some real care in wording. So we might want to take it offline because I doubt that we can be as careful and deliberate and intentional and eloquent during a committee meeting as we might be with a little more time. So let me just ask the general, like the concept of that first paragraph, with some wording changes as we've been talking about. Are you okay with us collectively offline working on some revised language, sort of maintaining the concept but working on the language? Okay. All right. So let's move to the second paragraph.
Yeah, I would not want to strike without replacing that property with an equivalent or better property. Again, I think it ties the district's hands, and it says that we wouldn't go for something better, and like we're actively working at doing that in a number of different projects.
So was there a reason? I mean, somebody struck or suggested striking that last clause. Is there a motivation behind that could be shared?
I think that was probably me, and that was, I think, before some other as originally written, I think it just said I don't think it had the earlier restrictions. So I would be okay with replacing that terminology, that language.
You mean leaving the current language?
I mean, I would be okay with sorry, I just got a call that I won't take. We can put back in without replacing that property with an equivalent or better property. We can bring that language back. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. There are no other changes on the first page, but does anybody want to talk about any of the language in the rest of that page? No? Okay. Move to page 2.
Oh,
You weren't quick enough.
yeah. Just there's in clause C, I'd suggest putting or instead of and.
See, where are you?
Page 1, paragraph C.
Paragraph C.
There is no paragraph C on page 1.
I'm sorry, did I? Oh, dang. Sorry. I was already on page 2. I didn't realize that.
Okay, all right, let's go to page 2. Okay, page 2. So this stops with the sale or long-term lease of real property as the header. Okay,
On mine, the last sentence of the first page hangs down there, so I'm assuming we'll
it's the last half of the
right.
last
We'll
sentence.
edit that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got my pencils, so I'm ready for all the little copy editing.
Okay.
Got my pen.
Okay, so so that paragraph has a number of edits.
Yeah, I would have the same question again as we look at some of our current properties. I think that would be overly restrictive in actually better positioning the district. So, you know, again, removing the strikeout of without replacing it with an equivalent or better property. And I don't know what would be a viable alternative, because there's some properties we're just not going to want to keep. Like say properties that aren't currently a school, or a school that's in a unhealthy environment. I think by,
Well,
by
so
allowing, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I get your point. My concern is that historically, property and land that are not currently, that were not being used, you know, at a certain point, were often declared unnecessary surplus and put up for sale. And we have come to regret those actions. So I think it's important that we have in this policy some constraints on declaring property unwanted or unneeded.
So could somebody, viable alternative, what exactly does that mean? Or I know sometimes when I'm writing something, I sort of come up with a phrase because there's a hanging participle. So I'm not sure what that means. And again, in policy, it's good to be as clear as possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that means either. And I no longer remember which of these were my edits and which were other people's edits. So I now have very little attachment to most of these edits at this point. So.
My rule of thumb is if I don't understand it, it was one of your ideas, Rita. But
well, I'm assuming if I don't understand it, it was somebody else's. It was one of you.
Okay, I'll take the blame. But anyway, does anybody have, or is that something we can peg to, again, do a little small group think through of how to state it more clearly?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I thought the current language already kind of articulates that it should be a last resort. What I'm concerned about, and looking at lots of property deals, not with the school district over the years, but like sometimes if you've got you know, environmental cleanup requirements at a property, like you don't want to be the landlord of that property or have a long-term lease, or you know, is that the district's, one of the district's you know, primary functions that it wants to have or maintain? Like, we're going to be a landlord all over the city, even if we've decided we could get a better property. I think we all agree on the goal that properties that we the district could potentially use in the future that we want to maintain that maximum flexibility, and sales should be the last resort. But I think this goes beyond that to keeping an attachment to the current portfolio of properties as they exist, even if they don't even actually have, some of them have students in them.
Well, except they may not have students in them right now. That doesn't mean they couldn't have students in them 20 years from now. That's why we're in the building crunch we're in, because 20 years ago, properties were sold off that should not have been.
Thank goodness Terwilliger School is still a Terwilliger School. And just a little history. I'm thinking it was about 2002. I walked into a developer's office and saw a map of Rigler School with half the fields where I coached baseball and soccer. Half the fields were marked off as new housing development because it would be a good deal for the district to make some money by selling off the land. So this is not, this is serious stuff that the district was considering at the time. It didn't happen, thank goodness. But
I was recently in a meeting earlier this year. I was in a work meeting where lots of other agencies were busily making plans about the Whitaker site, as if it were, up for grabs. And, lots of creative ideas about what could be put on that site and how it could be, part of this mega complex thing. So, I want this policy to be able to provide sufficient guardrails around disposition of property.
So I think we have a sense here of both. We want guardrails and also want a little more clarity when we actually might want to say, okay, this property is an environmental mess. I think that's a potential decision point. So I would volunteer to help, or if staff wants to do it on your own, just to help work on
I
this
think we have a
language.
general direction. It's really helpful. And so we can take a general direction and modify the language. I think I understand where the ambiguity is and what the objective is. So I think staff can take the first cut at that, at least, if that would be helpful.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And just to be clear, that we would be reinstating that without replacing it with the equivalent or better, like we did on the first page, to be consistent.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah.
I hate to not take a better deal.
Okay, so can we move on from that paragraph? Okay. So under the section, the Board of Education directs the following. Any comments on any of these changes or anything else you want to comment on?
So on 2, I think, and again, I'm thinking in the context of some of the conversations that are occurring within the Albina Vision Trust and potentially the Center for Black Student Success or Excellence, fingers crossed at the bond pass, is that there may be properties that PPS has that actually may be better suited because of their location and the air quality outside for uses other than public uses, and that we trade into a better property that has better air quality. So if we insisted something stay in the public domain without some sort of flexibility of, like, PPS is actually positioned better. We may not actually always be able to extract the value from a property if we were, if that were the requirement. So if we've decided we're not going to use a property, we've got something for a better value. I'm just curious why we would have a requirement that remain in the public domain. Again,
So I'm going to say, I think it's kind of the same thing here. This is in the thou shalt. This is thou shalt make every effort to, or this is the first option we want to look at if we do want to move a property. So I guess I would turn to staff again and say, you know, is this the right language that finesses that on the one hand, in general, this would be our first option would be to keep it, try to find a buyer in the public sector, but that not being a restriction in the sense that Director Prim Edwards is worried about. Or
I think,
just,
yeah. I think we can tweak that language to strike the right balance, understanding that that's a priority, but also not tying hands. So we can do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'd want to like make sure that our fiduciary responsibility, that we weren't taking a lower price for a property or getting a lesser valued property in exchange. Again, it may be that what makes a property not highly valuable to us, say outdoor air quality, might make it of lesser value for other public agencies, and therefore you have a limited pool of potential buyers. So it's somehow like taking into account like our fiduciary responsibility, also to utilize our assets to best support our students.
Okay, but I also want to make sure that we have sufficient guardrails so that the fiduciary responsibility has a very long-term horizon. And I'll just cut to the chase. I do not want to see another Washington High School sale.
Well, that's actually that's actually an example of, because it was sold to the city of Portland, that the value actually was pretty dramatically reduced.
Well, I don't think it should have been sold.
Yeah, I'm just saying that
that's my point.
The city's, you know, was like, this is what we're gonna pay you for this portion of the property, and so
okay.
Yeah, I think
I don't want to argue about Washington anymore. I want to move ahead. I think
But
staff understands what we're trying to do. Sorry, Ailey.
No, that's okay. We're saying the same thing, Scott.
Okay.
Okay, so can we kick it back to Liz and company? Okay. Okay, page 3, starting with number 3, sale process.
there's a word I think missing, or something additional has been struck out, because it says once is the board. Maybe the word is supposed to be actually Ailey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are you looking at?
The first sentence after sale process, the first few words.
Yes. So that's a bad edit. We'll
It's a
clean that
little,
up.
It's a little Yoda.
Well,
Okay.
it's traditional for me to critique grammar in the middle of a board meeting on policies that come through. So I'd be disappointed if there wasn't something I.
Oh no, you don't get to do that when you're actually on the committee, Scott.
Dang.
You know that?
They have to do it in the committee.
As far as the
Okay.
actual content of number 3, I think it's clear and I think it's solid.
Well, we'll find
Okay,
out.
next section.
Here's
Sorry.
section C. I'm suggesting an or instead of the and.
Where are you?
Paragraph C. I hope I'm on the right page.
Are you on presumption of market terms, Scott?
Oh God, am I on the wrong
Market
page again?
term C?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
You just skipped us through all that. We got to fight about like the first paragraph and A and B before we can get to C, Scott.
Oh, I thought we had done the whole thing and everybody was happy.
No, we were just on number
Yeah, no.
Okay.
market terms. You got to
Okay.
learn how to do this policy committee thing.
Well, I thought I was trying to expedite things.
So before you get to the other piece, just a statement. I do think that the presumption of market terms, that first paragraph, captures a little bit of the fiduciary balance that I was referencing with like you have to sell it to a public agency. So it's sort of like, okay, how do you reconcile those two? But that's the type of language that I would be thinking about when if we had a property. An alternative is a low market sale to a public entity.
So just to clarify, would we want to weigh in on either of those two being more important, or leave it? And maybe we should be clear about the kind of ambiguity is the right word of saying. Is our first choice to go full market value, or is our first choice to go public entity, or do we want to be clear that these are two values that may be in conflict with each other and it depends on the circumstances?
So that might require, if we want to do it that way, and we could, I mean, that might be a more elegant way to deal with this. We would probably want to add that to the criteria in this section.
Okay,
So,
I would just, sorry.
So that might be an E.
I like how all of it is written.
I'm sorry, say that again. You like it how it is? So I'm okay with us having potentially, in this case, this is more important, in that case, that was more important. I think it'd be good to explicitly state that so that, 5 years from now, somebody reads the policy and they're going, well, what do they mean here? And just be explicit that at times one may be important than the other.
I think that's going to have to be up to the judgment of future boards.
Yeah, I agree, because I think, so property transactions are kind of an art and a science. And I think there's going to be a lot of factors you want to consider, but let's just take for example, the Albina Vision Trust has indicated an interest in some of our properties. They're not a public entity. And say, for example, they came with a sort of full dollar, top dollar offer. But you had a public entity that was going to just basically land bank that site, like future development. I don't know that we'd want to be tied by, like, we already decided one was more valuable than the
Right.
other. I think so this sort of mix of art and, like I say, it's an art and a science. And I think stating both, and then you take this particular set of circumstances and look at them, because I don't think any of us would want a public entity just to be like land banking our property and they get it at the lowest dollar value because they're a public entity.
Right. So, and I agree with you. What I'm saying is that it might be useful to state that explicitly, that one does not trump the other.
Oh, I thought you were saying.
No. I was asking whether we wanted to specify that, and it sounds like clearly no. And so it would be, I think, a potentially useful guide to the board in the future to say, we explicitly are saying one doesn't trump the other. It depends on the circumstances. And maybe that's being a little too, I don't know, anal or whatever. But
I don't
think
any objection.
to that.
I
think that would be useful direction in terms of how the policy would be read.
Okay, can we kick that back to Liz? You got enough?
Yep, got enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what about the rest of this section?
Now's the time for your paragraph C, Scott, your or.
Is it the or, the and, is the offending and after the semicolon at the very end?
So I have something that might impact that. An edit.
Can we just, which and are you talking about, Scott?
Scott, you're muted.
Should be able to read my mind. The one before LBGTQ.
Or, okay. Okay. All right, sorry, Julia, what?
Yeah, so after the sentence that says express findings justifying less than market terms shall be under exceptional circumstances, consider the following factors. And I would add, or combination of factors, because, you know, I think you could go through here and there'd be like, oh, well, this factor impacts me. But my sense is from the committee or previous discussions that it might be a combination of factors that would be most compelling for us to, you know, consider it be exceptional circumstances.
Okay, that's an easy fix. Can I, there was something that that occurred to me actually after these changes were made. And that it was around the extraordinary economic or other circumstances beyond the control of all parties. And it was a suggestion that the below market rate be limited to the time associated with to the period of extraordinary circumstances. And so Liz, I think we have actual language around that. Can you?
Yes. Let me pull it up right here. To the extent any below market terms under a lease are granted by PPS because of extraordinary circumstances defined earlier, the below market terms shall be limited to the period of time when the impacts from the extraordinary circumstances exist. After that, market terms shall be restored.
That sounds good.
So would that be at the end of A, Liz, or where are you?
It would be, and I want to apologize because what we've just discovered is that there was a version that was preceded the one that was posted, and it had very few changes in it, but this was one of them. And it would be at the end, it would be after D, and it creates a defined term of extraordinary circumstances as defined by A, and then repeats that as the standard that's in play for existing or not. So it's, to the extent, the reason it's granted is because of a pandemic. When the impacts of the pandemic are over, the below market terms would end, was the revision that was requested, and that is the language that staff drafted.
So just to play devil's advocate, not on that particular point, but just of all these factors. So unless we say that A has to be one of the factors, we're not, we wouldn't actually have a pandemic or a recession. Is that? So,
right. I think they're all the factors are these, the structure of the policy is to say, these are the things we should consider. It isn't, I think, to say that all of these have to be present.
so for example, I'm just playing this out so we all have the same understanding. So for example, we weren't in a pandemic, or even if we were, we said, okay, because of B and D, we're going to have a finding that we're going to offer market terms, below market
terms, yeah.
So in that particular case, it would be irrelevant of whether you're in a pandemic or whether you're still in a pandemic or still in a recession.
Right.
Because you're not using that factor as
correct. What
add it, but just to be clear.
Right. Right. That's how, yes, I think that's right. And then I think, what is not stated in here is that a permanent relief from market rates, is that defined by a certain period of time on a case-by-case basis for those that aren't defined by some external event? Is it that's not resolved in the current language?
Okay. Were you offering?
No, what I think the question for the board, I was being maybe less direct, maybe direct. The board may want to put in some guardrails about how make things time bound, or a return to market rent for another request for abatement, or it may not. I'm just saying that's an issue that isn't addressed. If the board grants below market terms, is there a default position in the policy that it's for a certain amount of time subject to reapplication for reduced terms, or is it on a case-by-case basis by each request that the board would decide, again, not for category A, but for the others? I think that's an open question under the policy that hasn't been resolved. And we can draft in any direction, but I don't know what the direction is.
So because you could always put that in the actual new terms, right?
Exactly. You could just do it on a case-by-case basis and not put it in the policy. Just giving you options.
So, yeah, so let's I think get explicit as a committee about the point that Julie brought up. Are we clear that A is not necessary for an application for below market rent?
I think that's what it says.
Right. And I hadn't thought of it in that terms before, so I'm kind of running it through my head right now. On the one hand, I can see that maybe there's a startup. Maybe we have some property to lease and there's a startup. And, when you're starting up, you're not often you're not at full fiscal power. And so we'd want to say, okay, for the first year or 2 years, we'll give you a price cut, but we expect viability after 2 years or something like that. Is that something we want to entertain, or do we want to, or is that getting too much into, I guess, a development mode? And really the standard that we want to have is market rate, and only depart from that because there's a temporary condition.
I feel like part of, what there are two places in here, we talk about the Res J at the kind of end of that presumption of market terms. And then in that famous paragraph or point C, we talk about, the underserved community. I don't think it hurts to reiterate that yes, our priority here is good stewardship, that we want to use these funds to best serve our students. But I do think, especially when we're thinking about economics, like racial and social justice needs to be part of our economic decision making. So I think there's something beyond dollars and cents in the decisions we're making. So if we can add that in as well here, again, reiterating that, I would be in favor of that, to just really continuously commit to that change in lens, that stewardship is bigger than dollars and cents.
And we do have language about sort of cost benefit, because every time we do reduce rent, it means we're giving up something, and I just think, in my brain, every $100,000 as a teacher, more or less. So just I think that's a useful just metric to keep in mind. We don't have money to give away, but I can go along with that. So keep the language basically as it is, in terms of saying this is one thing we would consider among others that would be a motivation. Director Moore, you look like you're thinking.
I am. Painful. I mean, I
Sorry.
do think we need to have, I mean, I take the point, and I think to the extent we're talking about a change in lease terms based on something extraordinary, once the extraordinary is over, I think we should have the ability to reset back to the original.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, 10 years after, 10 years from now, presumably the impact of the pandemic will, God willing, be long since over.
Oh, you optimist.
But if we don't have something in place that provides an opportunity to reset, to revert back to the original terms, then the cut rate could last in perpetuity.
I think that was the clause that Liz was talking about that was inadvertently left out. Yeah.
Right.
Except for when we renegotiate any sort of change in the lease rates, I mean, you just add a term of when it ends. It's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think it's worth remembering that the reason we're going back into this policy is because we have found that the language is insufficiently clear. So to the extent we can clarify, now's the time.
How about this? When, not exactly, but if below market terms are, if there's a finding that below market terms are warranted by the board, that the term of the below market, that there will also be a setting of a expiration of the below market terms, so that those two things, the finding also requires that there be a finite point in the future at which they end or are re-examined for extension.
Okay, so that would be applicable, but that would not be restricted to A. That would just be
that would just be
under any circumstances. If there's a below market, then whatever agreement is reached, there's got to be a point at which both sides have to negotiate something. Liz, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you would want to, it does. And it creates, it resolves some ambiguity potentially, I think. So that's helpful. I think you would want it to revert, the default is that it reverts back to the market rate under the lease. And then it would, and you wouldn't want to set a date that's after the expiration of the existing lease, right? So you would, but we can work with that. And then the parties are free to agree to future extensions at a below market rate from that point forward, but you have a self-executing end date to at least work from. Right. So
okay. So can we take it back to you, Liz, and come back with
Yeah.
So let me ask another question. And again, this is the non-emergency below market rate. Would we want to consider in perpetuity extending a below market rate due to the other factors? Any thoughts or responses, or just deep thinking for a moment?
Deep thinking. I think it's really hard to legislate all of this. I think there need to be some guardrails, but I think we also are going to have to trust our ability and future boards' ability to make the decisions. And I feel like what's laid out here gives us both some structure and some flexibility to do that. And I do think that Res J lens is really important as we do this work. And I think Julia and Rita have both come up with scenarios during this meeting of things that worked well and things that didn't, and how it's like we can pass all the rules we want to try to say what can and can't happen, but we're going to have to trust the judgment of future boards. But I think what we're looking for with this policy is some guardrails to say, when we consider requests for lower rent, when we consider selling a property, here are some factors we need to look at first. But I don't want us to, I think the more we try to micromanage that, or put lots and lots of restrictions, the less we're going to be able to be responsive and nimble to the situations that arise in the future. That's kind of where I am on the policy.
So again, I'm not sure, but I was testing to see that if there was, we don't want to do that in perpetuity. Try saying that 4 times as fast as you can. If that's okay, again, not that it's an expectation or a regular occurrence, but if we're okay with that happening, then that's one thing. Or if we're not okay, that's another thing. Or if we're just gonna say, we'll just leave that for now. Again, I'd rather that we be clear on which one of those 3 that we're landing on, rather than just leaving it amorphous and amorphous with comment. I'm much happier with than amorphous without comment.
I think I'm in the amorphous with comment mode, and my comment is it may need to remain amorphous. That may be the best I can do right now.
No, I'm just trying to push us to be as clear as possible, because this is policy both for the board and for the public. And I think we need to be clear on what we're communicating.
Okay, maybe I'll make another comment. I'm uncomfortable. Just in principle, I'm uncomfortable with the district doing things that will have a perpetual impact. Based on, this is what it looks like this week, and hey gang, let's do it forever. When 3 years from now, circumstances could be entirely different, but we have no agency at that point.
How do we write policy for that? Because I feel like, for example, if we use this to decide to do a rent reduction for someone, or to lease the building at a lower value, and we say the life of the lease is 10 years, then when the 10 years come up, we renegotiate. And of course, the organization that we've leased to is going to say, well, we've liked this deal we've had. Can't we keep it? And then whatever that future board is going to have to then negotiate that and say, we made this decision when there was a pandemic on, and now there's not a pandemic and you all are in financial position. And so we're going to raise, and then the other entity isn't going to like that, of course. And so it's going to have to be that negotiation. So I think if we're talking about selling something, that is, once we sell something, that's a done deal in a lot of ways. We've let go of that property. So is that what you're thinking about, Director Moore, is like the lease piece of things, and how, we don't want to have a low lease for forever when you're talking about things in perpetuity?
Yeah. Well, and another one, we may lease something for 10 years because right now we don't imagine for 10 years we're going to need that building. We don't want to get rid of it because, I can imagine at some point, and 10 years from now, we've reached the point where, we need the building back. So, we're taking it back. The district needs to maintain, I'm sort of arguing Julia's point. The district needs to maintain enough flexibility to respond to prevailing circumstances, which change all the time.
Yeah. And so I think some of it is, what my hope is that this policy will help us be much more clear with our lessees and with our sales partners that, we want to be in business. We want to, we have buildings, we want to support other entities. However, our priority has to be the district. And so just because we give you a good deal for a 10-year lease doesn't mean that that's going to continue. And it's not, our priority is this. So I think this language in this updated policy will help be clear with our lessees that it is not for forever, that we're trying to be in good relationship, but that may mean things will change as our needs change.
I also just want to point out that there is language in the policy that it's not the subject of proposed revision, about the objective in real estate transactions shall be to maintain flexibility in lease terms, to allow for early termination, to adjust to enrollment fluctuations or other district needs for the property. So while that doesn't give you a hard and fast rule, it does articulate that is one of the objectives that the board has set in negotiating transactions. Just a point of reference. I think Danny, I just got in like a half second before she was going to say something too. So go ahead, Danny.
The early bird catches the worm. I as I sort of hear sort of like some of the sort of sticking points on this, and I think about like the sort of application of the RESJ lens, I wonder if it might be helpful to think about some options for some other voices to help inform your decision making. So I think sort of like to one of the points that was made earlier, and just sort of like the sort of like question of like ownership of land and sort of interaction with like other sovereign nations. One thing that I haven't heard folks talk a lot about is sort of like our relationship with tribal entities, and I wonder if it would be of value for this committee to hear from maybe someone like Laura John, who's the tribal coordinator from the city of Portland, or certainly Metro has a tribal coordinator as well, to hear about how other jurisdictions are sort of thinking about land disposition, ownership in relationship to the tribes in Oregon, and sort of like what that looks like, just for your consideration. And then I think as folks are contending with some of the questions about the overarching outcomes and sort of like what has, sort of like what rises to the level of sort of like criteria or selection or how you make these decisions. I'm wondering if it's valuable to talk with our communities and even some of our sister jurisdictions who are having a lot of these questions about how public entities contend with land leasing, land sales. So I think about the city and Prosper Portland and some of the work that they've done. I certainly think about like Metro and some of the work that they're doing. And it might be helpful to hear from some of the partners that they've engaged that are our partners as well, potentially like the Coalition of Communities of Color. So agencies who aren't necessarily potential beneficiaries of these leases currently that are also sort of informing this decision making, might be able to give you a broader, just another set of thought partners as you sort of contend with that, and think about the other perspectives that might be out there.
Yeah.
How would that happen? How would that happen?
Well, I think we could support you with that. So I think, one option is that we could sort of invite some folks to come and talk to you at this committee meeting. Or we could also, sort of ask folks to kind of come together to do some partnership, or, some thought partnership with you on this, if you'd like.
I think that'd be great. Especially like that first paragraph too of the sort of the framing statement. I think it would be useful to hear other perspectives and how other jurisdictions might approach it, because we're probably in a similar position.
Okay.
So,
Danny, let's talk about. Does anybody object to doing something like that?
no, I think that's a really great suggestion.
Okay, so let's talk about how we can make it happen. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm looking at the clock.
Rita, just to be clear, you're going to follow up with Danny about that, about getting some of those folks in. Okay, perfect.
And we'll have to figure out what it would look like. So
we could do that full committee, or we could deputize 2 board members and a student rep to have conversations and bring that back. And I'm concerned about our time at our board, at our official committee meetings.
I'd volunteer to be part of the subgroup.
Well, I'll leave it up to our board chair to decide whether that's a good idea or not.
Our committee chair. That's not a job I want. Rita gets to do that job of deciding who gets to be deputized to what.
Okay. All right. So I'm looking at the clock.
Who pulls the puppet strings?
Rita. Rita is who pulls the puppet strings.
Yeah. No. Okay. So it's 5:36. I have on my sheet that we're supposed to be finished with this topic at 5:40. But I'm going to push it a little bit. So let's move to the last page, because I think these might be easy edits, I think. Does anybody have any issues with the, I think most of these were staff recommendations based on how this policy has played out in recent years.
So we talked about this last meeting, but the word more stringently is, to me, I don't understand what that means or how it would be applied. I mean, I know what it means. I think it could lead to a lot of ambiguity or different interpretations. And it's just the long-term consequences and impacts are much greater with the sale than a temporary change in market terms.
I think from a drafting standpoint, to best support the committee, it would be helpful to know, is the concept something that you want, and then we can get to the language, or is the concept not? Do you want there to be a higher bar for a sale than for a short-term lease?
Yes, I want a higher bar for a sale than for a short-term lease.
Okay, so that's helpful.
Okay.
So we can work on the language then.
You'll come back. Okay. How about the next paragraph?
I'm sorry, maybe one of the things to do is, like, we actually spent the first 2 pages talking about what we're going to do in sales. So maybe there's just some reference of, also these factors will be considered in a sale, just putting it all together versus putting it after the factors. Does that make sense, Liz?
I think so.
Okay. How about the next paragraph?
I'm not sure what that's about.
It just says that we will abide by terms of grants. That's what it says. So it's acknowledging that there may be some decisions that are out of our control by grant terms. That's all.
Is there a case where that's relevant?
I don't think I have sufficient history on the real estate portfolio to say that. I think we did take this from the OSBA policy. So, but I don't know if Dan or Kirsten or Dana have any, or Claire, if there's an example of that. Listen, whether it's in your policy or not, you have to abide by the grant terms. So, I mean, it's also somewhat self-executing. It's a contract you enter into, and
but it's a good reminder.
It's a reminder.
I'm fine with it, whether it applies now or not. It's good to have in there.
And I think it would be nice to be able to policy that comes from OSBA. It would be a good thing.
We're using it, so we consulted with it when we were looking at it. We integrate the OSBA process into any other policy we touch. Slow going, but we're getting there. I do think Kirsten and my screen doesn't show Dan. I don't know if Dan is here, but the very last changes about the rights of way and the 30 to 90 days. They may be, I think I can speak to them somewhat, but they are the ones who have to really administer that. And if you want any additional background, they have come to all meetings, and we're finally to that, Kirsten.
I'm here.
Hopefully they were doing things for the first hour and a half.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have to deal with those, and it's just the timing of having to then go through the whole board process if we can. And, they're always consent agenda, and there doesn't seem to be issues with them typically, because they're required by the city or whomever, utilities.
Okay. Anything else?
Just
Okay.
one over. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
One overarching thing that I've noticed is that, at least in the Southeast Guiding Coalition, what future means, like future enrollment, we're only looking at 2024. or till 2024, which is 4 years, which I really don't think is long enough. So I'm hoping that like in this policy somewhere it states like future is not just 4 years, 10 years, it's longer, long term than just that.
Does it say 4 years somewhere?
No,
I'm just giving that as an example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in the initial paragraph, it says future generations. I think originally it said decade. And we'll be working on that paragraph, but yes, and if you look on page 1, under objectives in real property transactions, that's a section that we haven't changed at all, but it talks about the district's short, intermediate, and long-term educational and operational needs, considering long-term population and enrollment projections. So, does that sound? Is that good enough?
I just know that future and long-term haven't always been operationalized in policies. So what long-term means to one person could be vastly different to what long-term means to someone else.
So the term that's thrown around is that, property is a 100-year horizon. And I don't think it would be bad to put that in, kind of in quotes, not to be taken literally, but to, I think building on your idea, Jackson, is to say, hey, when we mean long-term, we mean long-term.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that's a really good point.
Can you throw some of that in there?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to stop us. It's 5:44. We went through this whole policy and did a first run through, so kudos. Looking at the schedule that we kind of sort of adopted, we're hoping to have this real estate policy ready for a first reading on December 1st, which means there's only one intervening meeting between now and then. So if we're going to do any consultations, and the next meeting is 3 weeks from now. So in order for us to meet that December 1st deadline, we've got to hustle to do some of that work. So I guess my request is, let's try to meet that deadline. If we can't, oh well. But I would like to be as close to meeting that deadline as we can, because there is some urgency involved here. So,
can I offer maybe a suggestion on process? Can I?
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
I only see like the top of your head on my screen for some reason.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Same thing with Ailey. Oh, there it goes. So one of the things, maybe, because I heard a lot of agreement and like, okay, staff will get that to the agreement. Maybe the way to expedite it is to have staff send it out to the committee members, and then just have people read with a deadline to review and send it back to staff. So it's not form of the committee doing the work, but that way you get all of that instead of, in one big swoop. And then when we come back to the committee, you're down to just where there wasn't consensus.
Yes. It still only leaves us one meeting, and it could be eminently doable or not.
And I think we have the
don't know
engagement piece too, right? So the engagement is informing some of that language as well. So
Right.
the timing of that.
Yeah.
But yes, we will move. I do think Julia's characterization of the feedback we received will enable us to turn a draft pretty quickly and solicit individual feedback. But I think the next steps on the engagement is really where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on. So that was pretty good. I think we deserve some pats on the head for that. And given that we are going to be in this meeting for 3 hours, people have impressed upon me the need to have breaks on occasion. This seems like a reasonable time to have a break. So is 5 minutes enough? Okay,
Thank
5
you.
minutes. That's 5:53.
I'm probably going to be 7 because I got to feed my dog. Sorry.
Okay.
Her to
Get
eat
back
and go out takes at least 7 minutes.
Okay, get back as soon as you can. Okay,
I'll run.
so let's try for 5 minutes and we will reconvene, okay? Thank you. Is the complaint policy. So this was another one where I think we got the revisions, we got the red line version, I think, for the last meeting, never got to it. So hopefully you've had a chance to actually look through them, through the revisions. So we're sort of looking at it overall. Any overarching reactions to the suggested revisions? I will say that I think most of these revisions came from staff based on experience over the last 2 plus years. So anyway, any overarching commentary?
And Rita, this is Stephanie, if I can just add some context. So we went through the bulk of these edits at the September 14th meeting. You had some feedback for us. And so I would say just to set the context, that the next set of edits was pretty minor, and I don't want to take that away from both Lydia and Mary worked on those, but you have gone through most of the general gist of the policy.
Okay. I will admit, I have COVID brain, so it takes me a while for the memory bank to re-enter the scene, but okay. And this is my cat. Any other comments?
I mean,
okay.
Are we going to have? I'm sorry. I'm just curious about that. There's a question overall about the discussion because last year we really didn't have. I mean, we went through the staff level changes, but are we going to have that a broader discussion, or is that just the opening question? Sorry.
I'm not sure I understand the question. You mean, are we going to go through all of, like, paragraph by paragraph? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm just asking what the process is, because so last time you asked for overarching comments, and then we did a deeper dive, and we've got.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do here too.
Okay. Is it possible just to, I mean, I've got the version from the last meeting, but is it possible for staff to highlight any non-material changes that were made between the last meeting and this one?
Non-material?
Well, no material.
Oh, material. Okay. I was thought.
I'm going to ask.
I'm not sure I'm understanding, Julia, material.
Let's just go through and we'll figure out which one's on the fly. I get your point, Julia. That I think when we look at a paragraph, we can see was it a material change or just a rephrasing, kind of a clarification?
Okay.
There are both. There were both.
So
Okay,
Julia,
well,
your question, because you don't have you have a prior version to what's in board books, and you want to link what your prior version was to board books.
Correct. So this, just understand, like, so when I'm looking at the one on board books, the changes all appear to be in butterscotch, I guess, at least with my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are in red, and so, like, are the red ones the new ones, or which? Because I can do a comparative. It's just I made some pretty extensive notes on the last version.
Julia, I think it's a totally fair question. I want to increase the degree of difficulty, which is I'm looking at the online version versus, at least when I printed it out in the butterscotch, like paragraph D13 it's showing it's not showing language that's stricken. So I'm not sure what happened in the translation. There should be some language. When you read it, you can tell that the edits are kind of a mess. So it may make sense. I think that, again, I don't want to rely on my memory for which changes preceded which meeting. I think since that was talked about in September, there have been mostly language changes. We're trying at each iteration to simplify the language to make this process as accessible and understandable. I think there's still more work to do, but we're trying to take out PhD level words and describe things in more straightforward language. I think the substantive areas really start on the step 3 side in section B, with the exchanging of information and a discussion about how information will be shared with the complainants before they come in. I think there was not the referral to a reader of this policy to other places to file complaints that are not formal complaints but might arise from other concerns was mostly just populated with contact information. The D1 clarified that what supports may be available, but that legal advice was not part of the thing that was included. And then in D12 and 13, I think 12 has not been changed much, just from my recall about exhaustion, like not repeat filing on the same event. Is clarified, and 13 has definitely had some edits about what the board of role members, the role of board members are or is during the pendency. And I think that's how I would walk you through substance versus not. I don't know, Stephanie, Lydia,
No, I think
Mary.
Yeah. If I recall, this was the Google Doc that was cursed. So we would make changes to them. The changes wouldn't appear, or as you see, they're all showing up. So I apologize for that.
Would it help if I showed a document?
I think that if you show as long as it, well, I don't know if it has all of the internal. You suppress those. I don't know.
So can you? So we're talking about the same one. Which document?
I think we can walk through it. I think we can walk through it, Roseanne. I think it's mostly paragraph 13 where the edits are really tortured, and the rest, I think, let's walk through conceptually again. Let's.
Yeah. And you mean the one that's posted in board book right now?
Yeah, the one that's posted in board book. That's one everyone has. I think that's one we in the board review.
Let me get to that one.
Paragraph 13 it looks like there are multiple versions that are not distinguishable. So
I can, when we get there, I'm happy to read.
okay, if you're not talking, can you please mute? You're getting a lot of background noise.
When we get to paragraph 13, I'm happy to read the version that has the actual conform the edits that were made, since they're not showing up here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's just go through. Are you, Julia? You're muted.
Yeah, so my question was, so I was just getting ready to print out the current version. So does that mean Liz is going to change, or it's going to be different? We're going to discuss something different than what was in board books?
Yes, because I think board books makes no sense because it doesn't have language stricken that was stricken. So the sentences actually are a little nonsensical. The gist is there, but the words don't support it. And
so what am I pulling up?
For that one paragraph though, right?
As best I have identified as I'm looking through this. I don't know, Roseanne, and if Mary, if you can take a quick look while we're walking through this to see if there are other pieces, but I think that's the big one.
So I'm going to confirm, I'm pulling up what's posted in board book or not.
You don't need to post that. Everyone has that. So you don't need to put anything on the screen.
Okay, so in the interest of time, let's just plow through. And if we come across things that don't make sense, then Liz will explain what it's supposed to be. How's that, Liz?
Excellent. No pressure.
Okay. Paragraph 1.
So I had a question about that. The definition of the PPS community. So we've added the word PPS. It used to just say broader. What does that mean?
That was conforming the policy application to that which is in Division 22. That's a choice. That's a policy choice. So it's recommended, but by staff.
If you're not speaking, please mute.
But it is a conforming to Division 22 edit. But the board is free. You can't make it narrower than Division 22, but you can make a policy decision to open up the formal complaint process outside of the PPS community to anybody if you want.
Yeah, so I guess what I was wondering, like the distinction I was thinking about is, to me, that means, okay, to start with, within the geographic boundaries of PPS, to start with, like, by adding PPS, that would that's one definition of the PPS community, and then another definition would be you actually have to be like a stakeholder, a direct stakeholder, like a parent or a student or a staff member. And to me, it's not clear what we mean. And to me, it's an important question right now, because I think about, like, today we got another sort of revisiting of an earlier complaint that was not necessarily a stakeholder, but a neighbor of a PPS building, or when we're asking the broader.
I can resolve this because the Division 22 speaks about residing inside.
Okay.
So you can't make it narrower than that, but you can make it broader, and we can make it more clear also in the language. But it's a policy decision that the committee needs to make.
So it's a geographic designation.
Geographic, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we may have parents who, one of the custodial parents lives outside of PPS. So we might want to flag that.
But you're a parent or guardian, right? So you're a parent or guardian. Oh, you're already included in the list of folks who can. It's students can, wherever you live, can bring a complaint under the policy. Parents or guardians, wherever you live, or if you're neither of those but you live in the boundaries. can bring a complaint under this policy.
I think we should just make clear that it's a geographic definition because otherwise it's 20% of the people versus 100%.
Yeah. Okay, we can absolutely do that.
Julia, did you have other comments on paragraph 1?
Yeah, but I have to get back up into my space. Not in paragraph 1. Sorry.
Paragraph 2, I think we were just trying to clean up the language to make it as clear and explicit, and also, you know, narrow down words.
I feel like you guys have done a good job of that, of trying to clarify and streamline. And there's lots of parts coming up that I really appreciate. And some of just the little tweaking of the language, like in paragraph 2, I think is just, it makes the complaint process a little more accessible for people. So I really appreciate the way that that language has been so thoughtfully looked at in this paragraph.
Okay, paragraph 3.
Kind of the same goal, was just to clean it up a little bit.
So some of the language is you've turned into a passive tense. And my English teachers always frowned on that.
So we also, I mean, that's one principle, and I agree with you, Scott. I like active voice. I think we can further refine that. We were also trying to take out unnecessary phrases like the board intends, because the policy is a reflection of the board's intent, right? So those were some of the, this was probably a quickie edit if that's one of the examples we're looking at.
Yeah, just PPS shall settle complaint as quickly as possible. And it gets at least some agency.
Agree. Agree.
Okay, paragraph 3.
So maybe this is a AD question, but it's also down below at transparency and accessibility. But I don't know how people, there was a point in time when we had the ombudsman at every meeting, and when you went on, in fact, the whole complaint policy redo came out of the Parents Coalition complaint and the ODE requiring it to be more transparent. But I don't, how would people, how is this, how is accessible defined? Because I mean, I agree with the wording, but I'm just wondering like what that means. Because we say it in our current policy and it doesn't seem super accessible.
I think that comes below when we talk about how you make, you know, district receives complaints. So that's lower down in the policy. But if that's not clear, we can look at that piece.
And the wording of must just gives me the same kind of heartburn. Well,
where are you?
So again, I hope I'm on the right version. Are we in a different version than the board book?
No.
No.
Okay, so
No.
I'm in the next to last paragraph. The complaint process must be accessible to.
The next to last paragraph on the first page.
I got it, Mary. I got it.
Okay,
The
all
last
right.
sentence.
I got it.
Oh, I see it. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
And you would change it to what, Scott? What's the issue with must?
We'll just make it active voice. We can
Thank you.
take that.
Yeah.
Stephanie, maybe you can speak to accessibility and what's in policy versus what's in implementation and AD and how you're thinking about that.
Well, I would say the AD is fairly simplified and refers back to the policy because the policy is so prescriptive, which is fine. Accessible, I think I don't have a.
Well, I think let me jump in then, because I think what accessible is intended to mean, and maybe we need to change the language, but that it's understandable. That it's when you pull it up on the website, that you say this is how it works. This is what my expectation should be. That this is how this is delivered. When I file this is the response I will get. That it isn't it's that when you read it, you can take it in, understand what it means, and have reasonable expectations about what you'll get in return, and that's not that's just I think that's the intent as I read accessible here. It also has some. It should also have some ADA components to it. If you need special supports, then we want to help provide those as well. But I think we address that in a different, I think accessible in this context means in the broader sense.
Just one more comment about accessibility. I mean, looking at this policy, one of our longer policies. And if we're talking about accessibility, I think trying to get all of the information inside of this policy is really hard. So I'm wondering, is there somewhere where we can synthesize what is the most important that you need to know if you want to make a complaint somewhere on the website?
There is. So if because I have Googled complaint policy on our website, and it takes you straight to what we now created as a community resource, and it provides information on how to resolve issues that parents have at school. And so it gives them a breakdown. At the end, we have the formal complaint policy, which also has a hyperlink to the formal complaint form, or if not, my email address, the complaint coordinator's email address.
And the reason we drafted it that way is we really try to steer people to just reminding them that they have a school resource, a teacher or an administrator, that administrators want to do that work, and that they have supervisors, and sort of works up the chain to the deputy superintendent, Dr. Cuellar. But there's also this process too, just because we found when we did have the ombudsman, people didn't know that. And we've heard a strong pull from the OSP team. Please send people back to us. We want to work with parents and families. And students. We'd rather not see it go through the formal complaint policy or process. Excuse me.
So actually, I just went on to the PPS website and typed in how to file a complaint, and it does give you a whole host of choices. And the first choice is, I think, the site or the page that Lydia recommended, and it is really good about walking through the whole thing. It almost, this is more the how, and to be accessible is instead of having people typing in how to file a complaint, maybe there's something on just the main page that says, do you have an issue you need to have resolved? And then they can see the whole thing, because by the time you get to I got to file a complaint, how do I do that? I think they're going to be in a different place. So to be accessible, it seems like you need to be able to see it somewhere on the home page, about it's under conflict resolution, but you'd have to actually go and Google how to file a complaint to find it.
So we're thinking about something on the home page, like a click
and there is at the very bottom. I don't think it's probably what you are thinking of, Julia. I know there are debates about how to use up geography on a homepage and what to focus on. But we can look at making that bigger and more accessible in that to help meet that definition.
I think on our homepage, we should have a big banner with Guadalupe's picture that said, "Have a complaint." Great discussion, but wrong venue. We're off of policy. The wording around must, I don't know if this is the right wording, but it's more our goal or our expectation. We can't have a policy and process and declare that it is accessible, because we'll have people who tell us it isn't. So I think we need to say it's something along the lines of our goal or our standard that we want to be held to is that we will have a process that's accessible along all sorts of definitions of what accessible is.
Okay, can we take this back to Liz and company and work on some language around that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Roman numeral 1, annual reports, transparency and accessibility. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of the quite a few changes in this paragraph. And I think the first is that when we first wrote this complaint policy, there was no administrative directive. So we took out all of that language. And then the rest of it is changes for clarity. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So any issues with the first paragraph? A?
Yeah, to me, it has a couple of sentences that are disconnected from each other. To me, it's not coherent. We got one.
Like, such as?
I feel like it would read more smoothly. This is totally petty, which is our business. I feel like it would read more smoothly if the second sentence had as well instead of end on the last end. So the district shall provide training for building administration and designated district staff on how to handle formal complaints under the policy, as well as the administrative directive. Okay. Because it feels like we're providing training for building an administrative well, maybe if we move that, the district shall provide training on how to handle formal complaints under both this policy and the administrative directive. I think it's too many clauses that get a little clunky. So just a little, I think, above there and as well would help make that a little better. And then I think that because complaints can be an important indicator, there are 3 separate thoughts there, Scott, you are correct. But they all go to, how we do this sort of reporting and kind of what supports we're going to give to our administrators.
So we can separate out training into a separate subparagraph if that would feel better. I think that's...
Yeah, I'm looking for a topic sentence and I was having trouble coming up with one.
We'll put training in its own paragraph and try to make it feel more coherent. I think we can do that.
Substance is great. And that's the important thing at this point.
And I think the first sentence, the information regarding the complaint process shall be accessible and user-friendly. I think that fits under B. Because that's the full explanation of the complaint procedure. That's covered there. So that sentence may go better under B. And we may want to move B to A, and then talk about the training. And then C, I would separate out C and have C be the reporting. That would be my recommendation.
What would you do with C? I'm
And what
sorry.
was the last thing on C?
So I would have A, B, it's on the website and it's user friendly. B would be, we're going to train people and provide them with the policy. And C would be, the superintendent's going to report to the board as an indicator of institutional health.
I like it.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Types of complaints. This is compliant with the administrative rules, so not a lot of room for messing around with this language.
Although we do need to add the new rule on all students belong. It's added to Division 22 now.
Yeah.
Are there any additional like bullet points? Do we need to add anything in the actual list based on the new legislation?
I don't think so.
I think we'll add all students belong. I actually think we wouldn't necessarily, I think we should, but the way it's drafted, it includes it by reference to the rule, even if it's not specifically
you're right.
enumerated.
You're right, sorry.
But I think we should add it.
I mean, we could add, because it's a bias complaint process.
Right.
We could add to G, bias and discrimination in education.
Is this similar to a listing of grievances for Festivus?
Yes.
Sorry, that's where my mind goes to.
Oh, I think that list is significantly longer than this one.
Yeah. That or Monty Python. There's some real material here. But yeah. Looks good.
Okay. Roman numeral 2 timelines. A. Anything in A?
So is that a may be filed or must be filed?
Pizza. Not pizza.
It should be a must.
And where's some of that pizza?
No, sorry. I have headphones on. You can still hear it. Sorry.
No, don't worry.
Okay, number 1.
Sorry, number 1 of what? Sorry.
Roman numeral 2A1. Within 2 years after the alleged violation. You okay?
Yeah.
Okay, 2.
Are we going to have a debate over small d versus capital D?
No, that is settled law. Sorry. Okay, B.
Good.
Okay, C.
Fine.
Okay, Roman numeral 3, filing a complaint. A, step 1, paragraph 1.
So I know this is the current language, but actually that's not been our practice that it must be filed with the district's complaint coordinator, because I believe that board members and staff get formal complaints and we pass it on to the complaint coordinator. But if the requirement is that it's not our current practice, nor does it seem super accessible, unless Lydia's picture wants to be on the front page of the homepage.
No, thank you.
I agree. It's not accurate. We do forward them to Lydia.
Maybe if we say something like all formal complaints will be redirected to me or rerouted to me, or
they may be filed with you or directed,
forwarded to me.
Yeah, it should be something like a written complaint should be filed or forwarded to the district complaint coordinator.
I would say I would change where we're editing, and I would say filed with her by letter, email, or the written complaint form by either the complainant, or if the email or letter was received by staff or a board member, that they can be. So it's the person who's filing with Lydia is different. It's either the complainant or it's a board member or staff.
That works.
And we already addressed the board member piece in F, several pages down, so we may want to consolidate that into a single.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, because we have a time limit involved, does the clock start ticking when Lydia receives it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I think we should clarify that. Liz, you're giving me a puzzled look.
Can I ask one question about before we, if it's being forwarded by staff or board members? Because I'm imagining there may be a lot of complaints made to, say, an administrator or something like that, where they believe it's been handled.
Yeah.
And so what I don't want is to be caught with not handling a complaint because someone believed that the complaint was to them. And I don't want us to also automatically forward every complaint received by every teacher or staff member to Lydia, because we will become overwhelmed. So, but I'd like us to think about that language, because right now it would suggest that everything moves
Rerouted.
Yes, and that's not. I don't know that we may want that. That's up to you. But
I think you're right, Mary. I think that it would be good if we maybe part of, we're going to be training our administrators and staff how to handle complaints. And maybe part of the board training would be when the board gets a complaint that we say to the complainant, our formal complaint process is to send this to Lydia. Here is her email.
Do you want this?
You want
right?
this.
And ask, yeah. Is this what
the person who receives the complaint knowing how to handle it, and that this is the policy, that it needs to be filed with Lydia, and that our role as board members is actually to help people know how to navigate the system rather than navigating it for them. So that our job could be to say, I've received your complaint. To start the formal complaint process, this needs to be filed with our complaint manager. Would you like to take that step? And then we can help the person do that rather than us automatically just passing it on to Lydia.
Right.
So I would want to know more about how different communities feel about that, because sometimes people are maybe complaining about something in the central office and not feel comfortable sending it there, or that may be additional barrier. Say there's somebody on the board that they know because of, for whatever reason, and that's like how they feel comfortable approaching the system or the man. I mean, I think I look at, like, from a point of privilege, I think like I'd be completely comfortable if somebody sent me a note back like, hey, you have to forward this to the official complaint coordinator, but I don't think all people would feel that way.
But I think, Julia, we can forward it to the official complaint coordinator. I think once we've checked in that's what the person wants. I think it's about closing the loop to say, I've received your email. My next step as a board member is to forward this on to the complaint manager. I just want to make sure that's, that you're comfortable with that. Or it's not forcing them to have to do it, but it's sort of helping them realize the process is complaints start when they get filed with Lydia. So I'm going to file this complaint for you that you've sent to me, but having them understand that that's the process.
It also, looking at the web page where we're looking at conflict resolution, it's starting lower. And I mean, if that, what we'd like people to do is resolve things without going through a complaint process. And so the whole idea of creating that page was to encourage a more immediate resolution rather than having to, go through this process.
Yeah, like I'd much rather say, have you talked to your school principal than like, would you like me to file this with Lydia? Because I mean, the volume of mails I get, if I ask everybody if this is like, would you like to be in the formal complaint process? People are like, why not? Versus, this is the thing. So
I'm thinking about the emails we get, Julia, that say this is a formal complaint, and I'm reporting it to the board, and then our response back to those folks needs to be formal complaints start with the complaint, you know. And if someone's just annoyed, I've gotten an email about a principal or a teacher that someone's upset with, then I respond and say, have you talked to the teacher? Have you talked to the principal? Have you talked to the, area director, kind of thing? But I'm thinking about those times when someone has said to the board, I want to file a formal complaint, that then we say back to them, this is how the formal complaint starts. Could you forward this to Lydia, or would you like me to forward this to Lydia to start the filing process? So not with everything that crosses our desk, but those kind of level of, this is a bigger issue.
And like it or not, you're going to have to deal with the central office in this process. Needs to be pretty clearly spelled out, because that's how it rolls.
And I think it's important to have like a clear starting point for the beginning of a formal complaint. I would be very nervous if board members were expected to start, be the one to file the initial complaint. That would make me very nervous. I think that it blurs the line between somebody sending an email versus somebody wanting to start a formal deal, because it's a deal and it has to be a deal. So I would want to have some very clear line of delineation when a formal complaint process is started.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think of an instance in which somebody said this is a formal complaint, that it didn't just go automatically to Lydia.
File the initial
I think those are pretty easy, because I think those just go right to Lydia. I think it's the
somebody sending an email versus somebody,
the next layer down in which it's not clear. I mean, frankly, the volume of mail we get, I don't read everything. I mean,
so I would want to have some very
it doesn't always happen. If somebody wrote like a 3-page letter and we were getting hundreds of emails, I guess maybe I didn't get to the third page where they say, I want to think of an instance in which somebody said this is a formal complaint.
I think we need to leave the language as it is, that the formal complaint starts when it's filed with Lydia, and that it's up to us as a district to train our people how to help folks navigate that system. But I think I would like us to leave the language as is, and then the part about school board members is later on. But I think this is kicking off that timeline and saying when it gets to Lydia is when stuff starts.
I mean, it doesn't
and I think the more we try to write into policy, I'm thinking about what AJ said, the big bowls and the smaller bowls. Like, we want the big bowl here of it starts when it gets to Lydia, and then we can work on the smaller bowls of what is our responsibility to help our constituents navigate this system and our community, how to help folks navigate that system.
So I'm confused. Are you saying drop your language that you offered, Bailey?
Because I was trying to respond to what I thought your concern was, but I'm hearing your concern differently now, and I feel like dropping the language makes it cleaner.
Actually, I thought yours resolved it all, because it's sort of like, to me, when I read this, it's like I don't know where else it is in here, but it seems like, it's when it arrives with Lydia, and it can either arrive at Lydia through the person sending it to Lydia or it being forwarded on.
If there's a clear understanding, my concern about doing it this way is that we will we will bring on unwittingly some ODE complaints, because it sat in somebody's inbox, or they didn't recognize when somebody said, I want to make a complaint, and they said, well, why don't you go check, talk to the teacher, that what they meant was formal, and what they got was a redirection. Yeah. So that's my concern about that piece of it.
Yeah, I think we need to leave the language as is because of that. And we do want to be supportive of folks in the complaint process, but there is also, a responsibility with the complaint process to, we want to support people in being able to get it to Lydia, but we also want to make sure people can get it to Lydia. And so I would hate for us to add in language that then, like Mary says, means that stuff gets dropped.
Okay, so have we figured out what we want to do? Keep the language, change the language? I've lost track. Where are we?
Keep the language.
As
Okay.
is.
Okay, so that's step 1, paragraph 1.
I think we just spent 20 minutes discussing something and then not changing it at all. That's a
Okay.
record thing. Good job.
That's fine. Okay, paragraph 2. Okay, paragraph 3.
What's the 2 for?
What do you mean?
There's a 2 at the end of the 3.
That's just an editing piece. It's not part of the actual language.
I think it was numbering the when people were making corrections or changes. I think it was numbering those, because at the top, at number 1, at the end of email, it has number 1, and this one has number 2. It's really weird how it's making the
It's a
changes.
Google Doc thing, right?
Just ignore it.
Yeah, okay. All right, I want to do a time check. We're at 6:39. We end in 20 minutes. We still have one person who wants to get testimony. So we're going to have to stop this discussion at 6:55. So we've got 15 minutes left.
It's power on through.
I
We
don't.
can do this.
I doubt it, but let's give it a shot. Okay. Roman numeral 4, filing an appeal. Step 2. First paragraph.
I think that's all good.
Okay, paragraph 1.
That's fine.
Everybody okay? Paragraph 2.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, step B, step 3, appeal to the PPS school board. First paragraph.
Looks good to
Just
me.
one comment about timeline. I'm just wondering if we could include something about extraneous circumstances where maybe, like in the previous one, it was 7 days after a decision. That seems pretty tight. What if there's a family emergency or something happens within that time period where the focus of the complainant isn't on the complaint at the time and they don't have time to send that appeal to them?
I believe, yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Liz. So there is language here where we work with the complainant if they need additional time. We work that out together.
Okay, I just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is 24 hours before the hearing enough time?
Well, we've had cases where complainants have walked into their appeal where they got brand new information. So
Yeah. Okay. So 24 hours is at least an improvement over that. But yeah, I like that. I like the idea of having additional information ahead of time to help us make our decisions.
what about non-written information? Which seems to be more on the staff side.
What does that mean?
Like the superintendent or staff providing, just verbal information about the case or the appeal.
Prior to the hearing or during the session, or what are you thinking?
Who is the information being provided to verbally?
To like board members.
This is to the complainant. This is talking about communication between the staff and complainants.
So, but I'm viewing it like the information is relevant to the anything intended to be presented to the board or shared with the board.
Should be anything, any background information, all the materials from the complaint and any background information should be given to the board 24 hours in advance.
We actually do it with the packet Thursday before. I thought this section was in case something comes up. Sometimes Lydia will hear back from the complainant on Monday or Tuesday and we'll get new information, like about attendance. That's what I thought this was trying to get at.
I think this was perhaps intended that, but also intended to make sure that there's parity of information so that complainants don't have access to. I would hesitate to say all, because I think you're going to create footfalls that no one intends to create by the time a staff members ask something at a board meeting and then in the context of it presents it something that wasn't shared before but was known. I think we want to get as close as we can, and no one's trying to play hide the ball or surprise anybody. I don't think that's the intent. But I also wouldn't phrases like all. Things can come up in the context of that live discussion that may not have been shared in advance. If the policy says all, then that may create additional challenges.
Right. Since this isn't a judicial, like a legal proceeding, which may be the same case of what may happen on the complainant side as well.
Right.
And the 24-hour notice would allow the complainant to say, whoa, this is new information that I got from the district. I want to have more time to deal with this. And that would allow us to say, okay, we can negotiate another week or for you to process this and respond.
Right. I mean, I think that's the ideal, because ideally it never goes to a vote. I mean, that would be, you'd be hopeful, like Scott, to your point, that if, say, some relevant piece of information came up that staff thought, oh, well, maybe this would be an approach to resolving a problem, and they got the information as part of the pre-24-hour information, like, here's the compromise. And I think, look back at the ESL or the Wilson security issue where we ultimately, I think, got to a resolution without actually having to vote on the complaint. That's the ideal, versus like people being surprised on either front, either staff or the complainant with new information, or like, hey, we're going to lose this vote or we're going to win this vote, so we're either going to staff adjusting or the complainant adjusting.
So here's something as I'm thinking about this playing out. So let's say there was relevant information, that it was human error or someone was sick, or let's take out nefarious intent. But there was additional information in writing that would be helpful to present, and it's not delivered to the complainant in 24 hours notice. The complainant has a right to ask for, and I think we would give an extension of the hearing date in order to respond. What if the complainant says, no, it's late and I didn't get it and I want my hearing on this day? What's the consequence?
Well, none, because they had
their option, the remedy is to move it out, not that it can't be discussed, right? I think that I just want to flesh out.
Right, I see.
I mean, and likewise to staff, I mean, I'll just use the dog park. It's like if you go to Richmond, there's signs 10 feet apart that say two different things. One like no dogs, and the other like something that's like, well, maybe dogs. It's like, oh, do we know that? And also like it's all graffitied over. Like maybe we don't want to be like having to vote on something when there's a simpler solution that could be addressed without sort of forcing the complaint.
So I think if we give the complainant the option to delay or not, and they say don't delay, then we're in. But I think your point, Liz, is that doesn't mean what came up at the last minute is inadmissible. This is not.
Right. Okay, just want to clarify, make sure.
Not a court of law. Do we
Right.
need to put that in the policy?
I'm going to add a
or-
sentence about what happens if.
Yeah.
And that the complainant is entitled to an extension of time if they would like. The problem is we can't unilaterally declare it because the ODE timelines are required. So if the complainant doesn't want that, then we have to have a basis to go forward within the mandated timelines by ODE.
Yeah. Okay.
And
That
is
makes
that
sense.
only if we don't provide, if the complainant doesn't receive the information in 24-hour, within that 24-hour time frame? They ask for an extension if they say I've got new information and I did make the 24-hour timeline.
Again, we can't unilaterally extend the hearing date. It has to be it's really the complainant's call. We can agree to it, but we can't. We are bound by it. So anything that triggers has to be something the complainant agrees to, that we would agree to also.
Right, and I'm just saying either scenario, when we violate the 24-hour information, or when they provide, if they say, oh, I have something that I think I want to add and I'll bring it to you tomorrow, you say then we offer you an extension, or?
I think this is more for the protection of the complainant. And I think there's always room for a conversation, and hopefully we have lines of communication open where we can say that this is really new information. It would be great to, the board would like more time. Will you consent to moving the hearing out 2 weeks or whatever it is? So we think that this is really important. I mean, we can have that, but if they say no, then we hustle.
I think that's a good compromise.
Yeah. And ODE has no 24-hour clock. So we're just saying, what do we do versus our policy? Yeah. Okay. Good.
Okay. So are you going to add a sentence indicating that? Okay. Yeah. Fudge factor. Okay. The 1 and 2, we're still in step 3, appeal to the PPS school board. So 1 and 2, okay?
Yep. No changes.
Okay, and then the last paragraph under that?
That's just technical.
Yeah,
Okay.
actually, we need to fix the AD because it is inaccurate. It says that the board is the final decision on complainants, and it actually should say, with the exception of, it should say that Division 22 issues can be appealed to ODE.
Okay, that's in the AD?
Yeah, it's currently like contrary to law is what's in the AD.
Okay, all right, but do we say that in this policy?
No.
No, but I'm just saying the AD.
It needs to be clarified. There's a final, yes, agreed.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'm going to stop us. It's 6:51. We're not going to make progress beyond this. So can everybody make note where we stop? So next time we look at this, we're going to start with C, other types of complaints.
Can I make a request? Can we get whatever the cleaned up version of the end of it that is not quite cleaned up? Great. Before.
Absolutely. Yes.
Are we talking about D13?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
we will
good.
get you the appropriate edits that read like normal sentences and are intended to read. Yeah, I think it's the conversion between Google to a Word doc. We're
right.
Yeah.
They don't play well together. Okay, so question. So we're going to come back to this 3 weeks from now. We have asked Liz and company to make some additional changes to the stuff we've already talked about. So we can do this 2 different ways. One, we can next time we can start with C and then continue on to the end and then see how far we get. Or we could go back to the beginning and relitigate the new changes.
How
I
about,
vote for A.
so I would too. How about if we just get the revised version and it'd be like, look at it before the meeting and flag if you see anything that's inconsistent with the discussion, and if not, we just go all the way through it.
Yeah.
Okay, but but if there are questions about the earlier section, any revisions made based on today's discussion, I would suggest that we hold off on discussing those until we finish going through doing a first reading through all the rest of it. Okay, and then if we have time, we can circle back and do the beginning part. Okay. And I'm going to write myself a note so I remember what we just agreed to. So,
Okay.
Anyway, okay. All right. So, let's move to Mike. You have testimony you want to offer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ready?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So first, I want to thank you for making the climate crisis response policy a high priority. I'm really excited that we're going to start in early December to talk about it. And I really appreciate that you have a timeline around it, taking it to the end of February. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but I think that's really doable based on the work that's gone into it. And then I just wanted to note a couple of things. The draft, I think it's a draft policy, but it's unique in a couple of ways. One is there's been a large amount of work that's gone into it already, and it's been a very collaborative effort. We've worked extensively with PPS management staff and frontline staff. And I want to thank Aaron Pressberg and Monica Fleischer from the sustainability team, who have been integral in coordinating this work for us with the other departments that will be affected by this. But we've also worked with a lot of outside parties, environmental groups, community members, local governments, students, teachers, parents. We've gotten a lot of feedback already and made a lot of updates. I think we're on the 18th version of the draft. And then the second unique point is that the draft policy takes a unique approach to advising the development of the administrative directive. And we want to put together, or the draft policy identifies the formulation of a community-led climate crisis response committee that will make recommendations to meet policy goals. So the AD obviously is a process that the district manages itself, but we're interested in having an advisory committee that helps flesh out the goals that would go into the AD. And then the last thing I wanted to say is we just started working with a statewide coalition that's intent on developing climate action plans for school districts statewide. And we're reviewing climate action plans from throughout the country. And there's already one that exists in Corvallis that was just completed in 2019. And that's everything I had to say. And just thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so we have 3 minutes left. I want to check in. I think we made some actual progress today. So are we good with the 3-hour meeting? Okay. Because I just don't see how we can get through all of this work without more time. We just can't.
So can I ask that we have an established, at a set time, just a 10-minute break? Because for people with different things, it's right at dinner time. There's just a courtesy that we have. It's pre-established, from 5:50 to 6 o'clock or whatever, so that everybody knows there's a 10-minute piece.
Okay. We'll take it at the halfway point, and we'll just stop wherever we are for 10 minutes. Okay?
My dog.
All right. So Roseanne, can you build that into the schedule, into the agenda? Okay. Okay. Any other comments?
No, good. I thought we got a lot done.
Yeah.
Thank you, all the staff for your work. It's apparent that you've put a lot into these policies. And
Yeah, it's really,
Yeah.
you're killing it.
There's a lot that goes on in the background that people probably don't know. And I want to especially thank Kara because she worked over the weekend to do the grant document. So
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you, Kara.
So
Thank you, Kara.
Kara,
Okay.
take the rest of the week. Take the rest of the week off.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Okay. So anything else for the good of the order? Okay, I'm going to give you 30 seconds back. Thank you.
Whoa!
And we'll be in touch about the community, about the consultation stuff. Okay, all right, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.